Hello again everyone. Ignore the mullet, it's somewhat temporary, I got a bad haircut and this is about all I could do. Today we're going to be going over one of the most disturbing, controversial, infamous, not very good documentary slash mockumentary, Faces of Death. Faces of Death is a mockumentary that tries to convince you it's a documentary, and it is about, you guessed it, death. This microphone ain't picking up a lot, let me shift this a bit. Its entire reason of existence is purely for shock value, 100%. And in 1978 this worked as it created quite a lot of money, surprisingly, although it wasn't exactly respected. If you remember my Cannibal Holocaust video, which that's a pretty good video, so go watch that if you haven't seen it. I mentioned that that film kind of parodied or critiqued a thing called Mondo films. This is basically just that. This is what Cannibal Holocaust was basically trying to criticize. The only thing I will say about this film, however, is it doesn't really focus on the fear of other cultures, as it does also present a lot of Western cultures in a very negative light, even in simple ways, just like slaughterhouses. So there is less discrimination going on there. However, this film does use quite a lot of outdated terminology like savages, but we'll get more into that later, I guess. If this isn't making any sense to you, either just stick around and watch, or watch my Cannibal Holocaust video at some point afterwards. So we open on fake footage of a heart surgery ending in death. By the way, I'm going to be putting a counter in the corner of the screen of how many times I say the word death, starting now. We then get a title sequence followed by a fake autopsy with some practical effects which I wouldn't recommend eating while viewing. Then this guy comes out of the autopsy.
When this organ ceased to function, the result was death. The one reality we cannot avoid.
I'm sorry, who are you? This is Dr. Francis Gross. Yes, that is his name, I'm not joking. And he specializes in death. Over the last few years, he's been developing a library of the faces of death, as he puts it. He tells a story about a reoccurring dream in which he had many years ago, about a funeral for a person which he didn't even know. After this, he became an edgy 14-year-old who just got into black metal and developed an obsession with death. He tells us that soon we will have a better understanding of reality as we witness the many faces of death. We get some really pretty close-ups of some mummies, and then a bunch of animals killing each other, e.g. bugs in a rainforest and a dog fight. I'm not going to show that footage because I'm pretty sure it's real, and I don't think YouTube would appreciate that. And also, we like dogs on this channel. I'm not going to show footage of them killing each other. Up next, we get some footage of a tribe, as stated earlier. Now we'll talk about racism in Mondo films a little bit. Now, a lot of these Mondo films can be purely built off racism, like Africa Blood and Guts and The Killing of America, I think it's called, which they're made purely just to show different cultures in exaggerated, violent, negative light and just be like, this culture's evil, we gotta do something about that, we gotta stop them, I guess, I don't know. And it's just kind of an interesting piece of history because it shows that even in like the 70s to early 80s, there was still just propaganda being pumped out, sometimes by the government even, just essentially made to just invoke fear in other cultures. This one, again, bad example because there's less of a focus of it in this film, but it is something to be talked about more. And also this film was very much not made by the government. However, it's still iffy here because they've still created what's I'm assuming is a fake tribe and presented it if it was real, you know, making them just seem violent and cruel and like savages, as they said, which really does gotta make you wonder if this film is tied with the more extreme side of Mondo films. Moving on, next we see some real footage of farming and slaughterhouses showing the killing process in gruesome detail. A while later we see some different kinds of hunting, like fishing large sea creatures and harvesting a bunch of seals for their skin. We also then see some footage of illegal poaching of alligators, which I'm not sure if this is real or not. Next we see some very fake footage of a man being attacked by an alligator, which then brings us on to the kind of next section of the film, which is essentially human death. First of all, we're introduced to this assassin character whose identity is anonymous. There's loads of fake footage of things like assassinations and mass shootings. We also see some, I think, real footage of embalming and autopsies, but I could be wrong about that. Up next, we see possibly the most infamous scene of the film, although it is very clearly fake footage, of a man being executed via electric chair. Meanwhile, some very childlike music is played on a xylophone. Next we see some more fake footage of a Middle Eastern public execution via beheading. We also see some cult rituals involving things like snakes and human organs. We also see some very likely fake footage of bodies that have been pulled out of the ocean. Dr. Gross proceeds to just fucking straight up roast these victims.
I find this kind of death particularly tragic. It is caused by sheer stupidity.
We see some people attacked by a bear, some natural disasters, and radiation. One interesting section was when Dr. Gross talks about war, talking about how the human mind is so fragile and can be manipulated into hate so easily. He also talks about how humans are so quick to hate and blame others for almost anything. This part of the film was like the only part of the film which I can actually say was like pretty insightful and like interesting commentary. Pretty much the whole rest of the film was just shock value, but I think if they really focused on this style of documentary, it could have been really good, because even just this short little bit about war genuinely had me so interested. But then all that interesting stuff goes down the drain, because then the next scene is just parachuting gone wrong, resulting in death. And like most of the film, there's pretty much nothing that interesting you can really add to that. As we come to the end, Dr. Gross talks about the possibility of life after death. We see an interview of a man who claims that his wife and son came back as ghosts. So 2 paranormal investigators go around to his house and do the old phasmophobia test of putting flour on the floor and seeing footprints. I think it's safe to say that this film has not given me a stronger belief in the paranormal. So as we wrap up the film, Dr. Gross states that his investigation has given him a different outlook on life and death. And you know what, good for him. It sure hasn't given me one, but good for him. So that movie was kind of weird. I don't really know how to feel about most of it. Was it good? Not really. Was it disturbing? Yeah. Was it shocking? Not even a little bit. It was almost kind of boring. However, it is a very interesting piece of film history, I will say that much. And there's probably a whole other massive conversation that can be said about this film. I don't really think this film has a target audience. I genuinely think it was made to just be talked about and for morbid curiosity. Can't say I enjoyed it very much or thought it was very good at all, but if you liked it, that's great. I'm happy for you. In terms of the actual content, well, I guess there are parts that were disturbing. I mean, if you're squeamish, you probably won't like it. But there's nothing that's really gonna stick with you at all in terms of horror. Even in a shocking aspect, it's really got nothing to it. Anyway, that's gonna be about it for today's video. This is quite an interesting film, however, so if you do want me to cover similar films to this, then do let me know, because there's a ton of them. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.